Welcome, viewers. I'm Dr. Rajeev Mehta, and this is Doxirus, the Health Connection, which you're watching on IndusTV International, the official media partner of Glow India, the Global Indian Diaspora Alliance. Today's program about the COVID-19 vaccine is sponsored by the Rotary Club of Plainsboro, North and South Brunswick in New Jersey. Their members are online, and some have sent in questions for our experts, and hopefully we will get them the answers that they're looking for. Our experts for this topic are Dr. Tanaya Bhowmick and Dr. Sunanda Gaur. Dr. Bhowmick is an infectious disease specialist for adults and an associate professor of medicine at the Robert Wood Johnson Medical School in New Brunswick, New Jersey. She is the chair of the Antimicrobial Stewardship Program at Robert Johnson University Hospital. Dr. Gaur is an infectious disease specialist for children and a professor of pediatrics at the Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. She is the director of the Robert Johnson AIDS Program, director Clinical Research Center, and director South Asian Total Health Initiative. Welcome, Drs. Bhowmick and Dr. Gaur.
Thank you. Without
further ado, let us begin. I'm going to read out the questions that were sent in by the Rotarians. And hopefully, we will get the answers that they're looking for. The first question that I was sent is, how do I know that the COVID vaccines are safe? They were made in a record time. Is it possible that the pharmaceutical industry may have cut corners and not put these vaccines to the kind of trials that other successful vaccines were put through?
And it's a very good question that keeps coming up, because of course these vaccines were developed very rapidly compared to any other vaccines that have been developed in the past. I just want to assure the viewers that even though they were developed so fast, there were no corners cut. They went through all of the testing that's required in the laboratory, in the animal setting, and then in the phases in the human beings. So phases 1 through 3 that vaccines had to go through. All those phases were completed. It's just that they were completed in record time. And the reason that happened is because of all of the resources that were brought to bear on this vaccine development, because this is the way we are really going to get out of this pandemic. So the governmental resources, as well as the scientific resources, all were brought to bear, and all of these trials were done in record time. I mean, the numbers of people that got enrolled in each of these studies were, if you take it all together, were in hundreds of thousands, and they were enrolled in a very short duration. But that doesn't mean that all of the endpoints that needed to be met in order to see if the vaccines were working better than the placebo group were not completed. So again, just to reiterate that there is no question that no corners were cut and it was rapid.
Would you agree with that, Dr. Bhowmick?
Absolutely. When you look at the trials and the number of participants, it's thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, up to hundreds of thousands. And although it seems scary that it happened so quickly, they really did a good job in terms of getting this done quickly, which is what we need in the middle of a pandemic.
Good. The second question is, which are the COVID-19 vaccines that are available today, and which amongst them is the best?
So currently in the United States, there are 2 available vaccines. The one that was first approved was manufactured by Pfizer-BioNTech, and the second one is manufactured by Moderna. Both of them were approved via an EUA, which is an emergency use authorization from the FDA in December, about a week apart. Currently, just a day, 2 days ago, Johnson & Johnson also filed an EUA for their new vaccine, which I think Dr. Gaur will talk about a little bit later. In terms of these 2 that are currently available, they are both highly effective. 94-95% efficacy in terms of preventing infection. And they have very similar side effects. So I can't say that one is better than the other.
So I guess that kind of takes care of the third question, which was, should we go in for the Johnson & Johnson or the Moderna or Pfizer vaccine or wait for something else?
So I don't think, honestly, at this point, you're going to have a choice when you go to get vaccinated. Whatever is available is going to be there. But regardless, I think all of the ones that are currently available are good vaccines. So it's hard to say which one you should go for if you actually were to have a choice between all of them. As more data comes out about the efficacy in different patient populations and against the variants, we'll be able to potentially make recommendations at that point.
One of the Rotary members said, I've heard the COVID vaccines are mRNA vaccines. What does that mean? How do they work?
mRNA vaccines carry a particle of DNA. That particle of DNA goes into a person's own cells, but it stays on the outside of the cells. It doesn't enter the location where the human's own genetic material is located in the nucleus. It stays on the outside, and there it acts as instructions for manufacturing proteins. These proteins are then manufactured in the cell and then are released. And then this allows the body to then find these proteins and act against the proteins to create an immune response. So that in the future, if you are exposed to the virus, you'll have already seen these proteins and know how to effectively combat it. The spike protein, which is what has been received a lot of press, is the protein that the mRNA vaccine is targeting.
Are there other vaccines developed based on this principle and process?
So in terms of the mRNA vaccine, if that's your question, there have been a few others in the past for short studies, but these are really the first large-scale studies that are happening with these RNA vaccines.
I believe, if I remember correctly, that there were some studies many years ago, perhaps in an attempt to develop a vaccine against certain forms of cancer and certain genetic diseases.
Right.
So, and the baseline work was done, and then the people who were working those things kind of when COVID came along, I guess they went further. So is that
right.
The case?
Right. So the technology was being worked on already, and that's part of the reason why these vaccines came about so quickly, is because the technology was around for almost 10 years. And then they just sort of, the sequence of the COVID virus was released worldwide from China very quickly. And the researchers that were already working on the RNA vaccine just jumped on it, and they were able to create it so quickly. And that's really the beauty of these vaccines, the RNA ones, is that you can modify them also very quickly to create a new version of it. And that's going to be very important as we talk about the variants that we are talking about now, and how to combat that quickly. These platforms can generate a new version very, very quickly. So it's very exciting that we do have that. And I just wanted to address once again that this is an RNA vaccine. It doesn't alter the human DNA in any which way, because this is going around on the internet and people talking about it, but it does nothing. Like Dr. Bhowmick said, it doesn't enter the human nucleus. It doesn't go near the DNA to do anything to it.
What are the known side effects of these vaccines?
So the most common side effects are local site reactions, just soreness of the arm, potentially a little bit of swelling, redness over there. Some people also experience headaches, body aches, and less frequently fever. It's more common to have these side effects after the second dose of the vaccine as opposed to the first dose. And We also see the vaccine more reactogenic, meaning having these side effects in a younger population. So older people don't experience these side effects as much. So it's not recommended at this time to prophylactically take medication like Tylenol or Advil before you take the vaccine, because there's a concern that it could potentially blunt the immune response, meaning you won't have a strong enough response to the vaccine. However, if someone were to experience these symptoms, then at that point, it'd be okay to take Tylenol or Advil or ibuprofen.
Good. I mean, it's good that you brought up that point, because I've heard of some people out there who have been taking Tylenol before they go in for the vaccine, for the shot. And we don't know as to how beneficial that's going to be for them. How long does it take for antibodies to develop after a person gets vaccinated against COVID-19? And does that duration vary from person to person?
So for the two vaccines that we have right now, both of them have, first of all, amazing antibody response. Almost 100% of the people develop an antibody response. Second point is that we start to see development of some antibody as early as 7 to 14 days after the first dose. So by 14 days, almost 80% of the people have some antibody. And then after the second dose, again, within 7 to 14 days, you start to see tremendous antibody response. So they are really producing good antibody responses. We don't know for how long they will continue. It's just not been long enough studied yet. And whether over a period of time, 6, 12 months later or longer, that some of this antibody will wane or go down, that remains to be seen.
Since we don't know how long the vaccine will protect us against COVID-19 and how long the antibodies will stay after vaccination, will somebody be actually monitoring the antibody levels?
There are a lot of clinical trials that are ongoing right now. I don't think the general public is going to be getting monitoring of antibodies as it stands right now. It's not something that we do on a routine basis for any vaccine or any infectious disease. However, based on clinical trials that are ongoing and future research, we might be able to get answers as to the duration of the immunity and when to give a booster.
The next question that I received was, will I need to take this vaccine or a variant of this vaccine every year in a similar fashion to how I take the flu shot?
So this is another question that keeps coming up, and we don't know the answer to that. Version of this. The problem is we don't know how long the antibody immunity will be there and how long the protection will last. And then we don't know about the variants. We do know the viruses mutate and they change their versions. And at the moment, it appears that the current two vaccines are effective against the UK variant and to a lesser extent, perhaps to the South African variant. But what the future will bring, we don't know. What we do know is that viruses change. And with those changes, whether we are going to need more, only time will tell. At the moment, people should just try and get their first dose. That's the most important. However, whichever vaccine you can get the first dose.
I think the next question we partly covered, but maybe you can expand further on it. The next question is, several companies have made or are in the process of making vaccines against COVID-19. What happens if you get a vaccine now and then a more effective one comes along later? Can you get more than one COVID-19 vaccine?
Like we talked about earlier, both vaccines are very highly effective, at least against the predominant strain that was circulating at the time that the vaccine was studied. With more data and whatever happens with these variants, it's possible that you will need that to happen. So for the time being, if you get a vaccine now and a more effective one comes out later, it's possible you will need to get that other vaccine later on. If you get one type of vaccine at the moment, so this is a changing guidelines, is a very fast pace, this whole COVID-19, the infection, the vaccine development, the medication development. But at the moment, if you were to start with the Pfizer vaccine, it's recommended your second dose also be Pfizer. If you start with Moderna, your second dose should also be Moderna. Both Pfizer and Moderna are 2-dose vaccines. Pfizer is 3 weeks apart and Moderna is 4 weeks apart, at least how it was studied in the clinical trials. There are different things that are going on in terms of vaccine delivery, and there's the thought that it could be even a longer time period between the 3 or 4 weeks between the two vaccines, but that's also something that's a changing target.
Now, sometime back there was talk about a third dose, which was supposed to be against the variants. So is that still being discussed, or it's off the table?
I don't think I've heard of a second batch at the moment. There's really no plan that I'm aware of.
There's something floating in the media about people saying that Moderna and Pfizer are working on a possible third dose that might be used against especially the South African variant.
So they both have been testing the vaccine against all the variants in the laboratory and planning to study amongst those populations just to test their vaccine. That's going on, but I don't think at the moment there's any concrete plan for a third dose. It's possible it may be needed, again, depending on what variant becomes prominent in the community going forward. But other than that, at the moment, no.
Now, can anybody get the vaccine, or are there certain restrictions with regards to age, health conditions, pregnancy, et cetera, et cetera? Can babies get the vaccine? And if not, how are we ensuring that the babies are protected or the infants are protected?
I'll take your question. The first part of it is who can get the vaccine. And that is dictated by the criteria that CDC and the immunization committees have recommended. And as you know, it started with the essential workers and the healthcare providers and the frontline workers. Then it went down to persons above the age of 65, regardless of any underlying chronic conditions. And now it's, and it depends on states, it's different, but in New Jersey, for example, it is now open to all age groups with certain underlying conditions, all age groups 18 and above. So each state has been rolling out based on vaccine availability and their own state situations. A little bit of a difficult question. Both of the trials that were both of these vaccines were really not studied in pregnant women. When they did the studies, they excluded pregnant women. During the trials, some people did become pregnant, and there were no safety problems that they saw, but that was a small number. So when we think about the vaccine in pregnancy, the thing to really keep in mind is, what does COVID-19 do to a pregnant woman? What is the outcome? And there are more data now in that if a pregnant woman gets COVID, they have almost 2 to 3-fold higher risk of getting severe COVID, getting really sick, getting on a ventilator, and even dying. So there is greater risk. There's also a greater risk of preterm birth, it appears. So if you balance out the risks to the pregnant woman to the unknown risks of vaccine, one might come down to the thought that, it's probably a better thing to vaccinate than to not vaccinate. But the CDC has recommended it and said that pregnant women should discuss it with their obstetricians and make a decision, informed one. You could think about things like the pregnant women who have underlying conditions, they may be more likely to think that they are at higher risk and perhaps will take the vaccine. So that said, there are trials now going on or starting to study these vaccines in pregnant women as well, and we will have more data. And so that's so much about pregnant women. Now, you asked about infants. So the pediatric studies are just being launched and are in the process from zero to 18 age group. What we are going to be doing, or what will be happening nationwide and perhaps even worldwide, is first the adolescent group will be studied with the different vaccines, and then it'll go down to the younger age groups. The plans are even to go down to as little as 0 to 1 year age group going forward.
Now, if these vaccines prevent people from getting sick with the coronavirus, can they also prevent people from carrying the virus and infecting others?
So this is still an unknown. And that's why it's important that people, after they're vaccinated, continue to practice social distancing and wear masks, because it's still possible theoretically that they could be carrying the virus and pass it on to others. Now, this is also being studied actively, and hopefully we'll have some results soon. But keeping in mind that we now have variants that are circulating in the United States, that the vaccines have some effectiveness against it, but not as high as the original virus, that it still would be a good idea to practice social distancing, wear masks, wash hands, keep distance, and stay within bubbles or pods, as opposed to having large gatherings and interacting with large crowds.
We had another question, which was, can we travel after we get the vaccine?
So along the same lines, I think that once you're vaccinated, you are pretty much protected against getting very sick and being hospitalized yourself. But, we don't know, you could still carry the virus, or you can get very mild or asymptomatic infection and not even know about it, or be very, very mildly sick. So you're still able to transmit. So just having the vaccine really doesn't protect others. So when you travel, you would still need to use the same precautions like Dr. Bhowmick was saying, wearing the mask, social distancing, washing hands, all of those precautions are not going to go away. There will be, going forward, as we have more and more people vaccinated, I'm sure there'll be more guidelines coming forward, particularly for international travel and other forms of travels of, what precautions will be needed and what proof of vaccination the airlines would want, or other ways of transportation would want to have. We don't know all of that yet. I think we still need to get to a point where majority of the community is immunized and we have some level of herd immunity before we can feel comfortable about getting relaxed on that. I just wanted to say one thing, that when people are getting vaccinated, make sure to hang on to that vaccine card that you get. Either take a picture of it on your phone or just have it, because I think in the future, it may be something that may be in the mix of what is required when you travel.
You mentioned herd immunity. By when can we expect herd immunity in the US based on the current rate of vaccination? Any guesses on that?
I'll let Dr. Bhowmick answer that.
Oh, no. And I think the reason why Dr. Gaur is saying that is because it's very hard to predict. I feel like this is a question that's coming up a lot, and there are a lot of hypotheses out there in terms of what percentage of the population needs to be vaccinated in order for it to be protective enough that we have herd immunity, so that the population that isn't able to get vaccinated is still protected and the pandemic settles down as opposed to expanding. We know about other viruses and how much herd immunity we need, what the threshold for herd immunity is amongst those. So measles, I believe, is 94-95% of the population needs to be vaccinated in order to have the herd immunity. For flu, it's less. It's, I believe, about 50%. However, it also depends on the population that's getting vaccinated. So if you need 50% of the population to be vaccinated and only 30% is, then it varies. So the prediction for COVID, as far as I remember seeing from the CDC, has slowly been creeping up in terms of the percent of people that need to be vaccinated. And the vaccine distribution is not something that's in any of our controls. And I know that there are some clinics that are functioning, but now they're waiting on vaccine distribution. So it's hard to predict when there's going to be the vaccine available and actually distributed and into patients' bodies, into their arms. And then on top of that, what percentage do we need to achieve herd immunity? It's all a bit unknown at the moment.
Now, if someone's already had COVID-19, should they still get vaccinated?
So once you get COVID-19, you do make some antibodies against the virus. What we don't know is how good that antibody is in the long term in protecting you from perhaps getting another strain of COVID or getting COVID again. So in general, what the CDC has recommended in view of that is that person who's gotten COVID should wait 90 days, so about 3 months before going for the vaccine. Just because it's thought that for 90 days, you probably have some antibody, and giving a vaccine too soon might cause somewhat of a greater reaction, perhaps, from the vaccine. So that's been the thinking behind it. We don't know a whole lot yet about it. There are anecdotal reports of people who've had severe COVID and then have gone on to get the vaccine, and they've gotten a somewhat more severe reaction to the vaccine. So that's where a lot of people have been asking this question. I did see a study recently that said that people who've had COVID and then go on to get the vaccine, they get a really strong antibody response even after one dose, and maybe do not need a second dose. So those are, a lot of them are still questions. We don't know all the answers, but in general, the recommendation is that those people can get a vaccine after 90 days.
Now, some of our community members have brought up concerns, somebody claiming that, oh, the vaccine contains pork fat. Somebody else is claiming it contains beef fat. And then there's somebody else who's claiming that it contains heavy metals. There's concerns regarding autism. How would you address those concerns?
EUA clearly states the components, the ingredients that are within the vaccines. And I looked at both of those EUAs and I looked at both ingredients, and it clearly states out it has the mRNA, it has some preservatives like sucrose, which is a sugar, but there's no mention of using animal products. I think it's unfortunate that those types of conspiracy theories are circulating, because I fear that it will affect many people from getting vaccinated who are susceptible and will later become sick or pass it on to someone else that they love and care about. But there is no animal fats that are part of these vaccines. I'm going to let Dr. Gaur address the autism issue, since that's something that comes up a lot for pediatrics and vaccinations.
Yeah, so the mercury issue has come up in terms of pediatric vaccines, and there is no mercury component in these vaccines. So theoretically, there's none of these things in it. The conspiracy theorists, believers in those, unfortunately, those things are propagated on the media, and it's very hard to battle it if people just have a belief system. But the science is clear that there is no such product in those vaccines.
Can you recommend some sites that provide up-to-date information about this topic?
So the CDC has constantly updated their website. They have different web pages addressing various questions, and they have a frequently asked questions section as well. There's also a way to sign up for a program through the CDC called vSafe. Usually that information is handed out to you when you go to get your vaccine. And it's a text messaging, smartphone-based program where the CDC basically checks in with you the day of your vaccine and going forward. I had my vaccine at least a month and a half ago now, and I've checked in several times. I had my last check-in just a couple of days ago. But this is a way for just keeping abreast of what's going on in the general population with the vaccine in terms of side effects. I know some of the people that I work with didn't even sign up for it because they said I didn't have any side effects. And I said, no, it's still important that you sign up because otherwise we're going to have some bias that only the people who have side effects are going to be reporting them. I didn't have any side effects. I had a little bit of a sore arm, but I think that's a good resource that the CDC is using to provide information to the general public, and their website is excellent.
I think that was a wonderful session we just had, and you ladies have presented some marvelous information, which I'm sure the public will benefit from. Thank you for appearing on IndusTV, The Health Connection. Thank you, IndusTV International. And I would like to especially mention here Rotarians Jay, Blissy, Darshan, Naresh, Kunal, and Venkat. Please give yourself a pat on the back for asking such timely and relevant questions. A big thank you to all our viewers. We hope you enjoyed today's show, which was sponsored by the Rotary Club of Plainsboro, North and South Brunswick in New Jersey. If you have any more questions, please keep them coming through the chat box of this video, and we will try to answer them in due course. We hope to be back soon. Till then, goodbye, God bless, and stay safe. Thank you.